What's the biggest moral dilemma in season 1 of The Walking Dead show? Welcome back to Lost in Games Unscripted, the series where I talk about whatever happens to be on my mind at any given time. And today that happens to be Walking Dead, which is something we've talked about a lot lately, and moral decisions. Because while there aren't a lot in season 1, there are a lot of big moral conundrums throughout the series in general. And while this is only going to be a video about season 1, if you're interested in seeing future videos about seasons 2, 3, 4, and on, let me know down in the comments below, and make sure to like this video to let me know that you want to see more like this. Now, season 1 of The Walking Dead is the shortest season. I think it's only 6 episodes if I remember correctly. I just got done watching it again, but I didn't count the episodes. And there aren't a ton of moral dilemmas in season 1 because it's mostly focused on character development and kind of getting the story started, right? So they're introducing us to all the different characters and kind of giving us some of their personalities and their backstories, a little bit of backstories, not a ton, but and getting us used to kind of the world and the story, setting the rules of the world up, right? But there are a few interesting moral dilemmas to talk about, and there's 3 in particular that I want to kind of focus on, and we'll do the last one is going to be the biggest one in my opinion. The first one is talking about Jim. Now, Jim, he gets bit in, I would think, episode 4 or 5, one of the two. And he gets bit when they're being attacked, right? They have the walkers come into camp and everybody kind of freaking out. And Jim gets bit in amongst all of this, right? And there's a question about what to do with him. It's a moral dilemma because if you're in a situation like that, you're in the zombie apocalypse, somebody in your group gets bit, how do you handle that situation? Do you just kill the person and say, well, you're gonna die and turn anyway, so we're just gonna go ahead and take you out? Do you let them decide? Do you just tell them to leave camp and never come back, like kick them out? What exactly do you do? And they have a little bit of a back and forth because Daryl wants to, just go ahead and put an arrow through him. And Rick wants to let it, keep him alive and have a hope for the best type of situation. And then Dale, who is kind of the moral center of season 1, he wants to let Jim make his own decision. He wants to ask him, what do you want? And at the end of the day, they wind up leaving him next to a tree and saying, here you go. Have fun turning into a walker, I guess. So it's a moral decision. It's one of the early ones that the group has to kind of figure out how to handle. And it deserves an honorable mention because of that. Now, the second one, in my eyes, is when Rick has to decide whether or not to save Glenn. So Glenn had saved him earlier on, and then he gets captured by the Vatos at the nursing home, right? Now, at the time, Rick doesn't know that it's a nursing home. All he knows is that these guys, they had like basically almost a shootout there in the alleyway. These guys had captured Glenn. There's no context that Rick has, and he has to decide, do I take the guns that we came here for? He came here for the guns and the walkie. They were searching for Merle, obviously, but do we take these things back to camp, because that's what we came to town for, and just, I guess we just lost Glenn, or do we go after Glenn? Now, it's easy to say, well, yeah, you go after Glenn because he saved Rick earlier. Rick owes him one, right? But morally speaking, it's not that simple. So if you look at it from a deontology standpoint, they've got a prisoner of their own, right? So they'll have to decide what to do with him. But outside of that, they could just let him go and they could just head back to camp themselves, right? They don't have to do anything with the guy. It's not a decision, like he doesn't know where their camp is or where their people are. He's not a threat to their group. They could just say, okay, you know what? Get out of here. Go tell your people to let our guy go if they still have him, but we're going to head back to camp. Right? And from a deontology standpoint, that might be the best thing to do because you don't know that Glenn's in danger necessarily. You don't know that he's going to get killed or that he's being tortured or has anything wrong happening. He just got kidnapped. And you have to get to save your group. You got to take everything. You got to take the guns back, and you could risk going in and having to wind up in a situation where people get hurt or killed. The situation's already over at that point. Other than Glenn is gone, you could just cut ties and go. From a utilitarian standpoint, it gets even clearer because you're looking out for the best for the overall group. What's the best thing for the group in general? And the best thing for the group in general would be that Rick and Daryl make it back with the guns. And T-Dog's with them too. I forgot. He's the one that does. He's the sniper at one point. So it's the best thing for those three to make it back with the guns. And if you look at it from a consequentialist standpoint, and you look at what happens because they go and they take the extra time to save Glenn, right? One, their van gets stolen, which that might have happened either way. We don't know exactly when it was taken. Merle might have been waiting for them or something. You know, he might have found it right after they came back, if he's the one that took it. But beside all of that, they would have gotten back early enough, even if they had to walk back, that they would have potentially been there with the guns when the walkers came into the group and slaughtered a lot of people. You know, not only does Jim get bit, which we just talked about, but Amy gets killed, and Carol's husband gets killed, among others. There's a few. I don't know all of the names of the people that got killed, but there's several people that got killed in that attack. Right? If they had been back earlier with those guns, they would have had enough people probably to hold off the attack. You know, and they might have even not just been lazing about around the fire. They might have been sitting there debating what to do. They might have been a little more alert. And so they might not have lost people like Amy in the attack. So that's a pretty big thing from a utilitarian standpoint as to why they should have come back and just left Glenn there in the first place. Now, yes, emotionally it feels like, well, shit, Rick owes him, doesn't he? And that would be the one caveat from the deontology perspective of where he would have a moral obligation to him. He would say, you know, he would owe him for saving his life earlier, because Glenn he didn't have to do anything. He didn't have to give Rick any information in the tank. He didn't have to try to reach him, but he did, and he stuck his neck out for Rick. So, you know, that emotionally speaking, it's like, well, but I feel really bad doing that. And Rick probably would have felt bad too, but I don't think he would have felt as bad if he would have seen the results and known that, well, us being here with these guns actually saved lives potentially, right? And Glenn may have understood that, but he also probably would have hated Rick for a long time had Rick not come back for him after what he did, right? But the most important moral decision, the most impactful, biggest moral decision, I think, of the season, because those two things spin off of it, is the decision to go back into Atlanta to go after Merle. And this is a moral decision for a couple of different reasons, because Merle, he was kind of a dick. Nobody liked him, right? He also was threatening people. He was a racist. He looked at women in this particular way. Like, he was not really good people as far as that's concerned. That doesn't mean that he deserved to be left to die on a roof. You know, that's inhumane. But this is the zombie apocalypse, and there's a lot of risk that comes with going back into town. Now, they back it up and they say, well, we're not just going back for Merle, we're going back for the bag of guns, which, okay, guns can be helpful, and they did, you know, they would have maybe helped to fend off that horde that came up later. But Rick's other thing is, well, I need the walkie. They have the walkie that's in the bag of the guns that he was using every morning to contact Morgan. I couldn't think of Morgan's name. He was using the walkie every morning to try to contact Morgan, because he told him, hey, you have this walkie, you turn it on every day, and you know, when you get into Atlanta, and maybe we'll be able to chat, right? That whole thing, the problem with that, though, is that maybe Rick owes Morgan his life in a way, because Morgan kind of gave him the information and kept him alive and kind of helped him recover well enough to get out of town, right? That could be a thing. You know, he did explain to Rick. So maybe Rick owes him something the same way that he owes Glenn something. But the flip side of that coin is you have to look out for the best of the group. And yeah, they had the guns, which was helpful when the zombies came up that night. But realistically, having those men there, having those 3 extra or 4 extra bodies there, because there was Rick, Glenn, Daryl, and T-Dog, so that's 4 extra bodies that could have been there, maybe pulling guard duty, maybe keeping an eye out for things. You know, they had some guns. They were shooting, and they were taking out the walkers. They had knives and stuff like that. Realistically, knives would have made more sense in most circumstances. And you could argue all day long that, like, they shouldn't have let their guard down, and Amy got bit because she wasn't paying attention, and they all kind of got a little bit too comfortable, right? But this is still the early days of the outbreak, so it kind of makes sense that they would be a little bit more comfortable. But if they'd had those 4 extra guys there, it might not have turned out the way it turned out. And who knows the consequences and how that could have worked out. You know, maybe instead of Amy getting up because she had to go to the bathroom at that particular time by herself, maybe somebody else was already over there, right? Maybe they weren't all sitting around the campfire hanging out. Maybe they were chatting at the door whenever the zombie came up, and they wound up taking it out and then realizing we're being attacked, right? Any number of things. So that is the most impactful choice to make, because they made the decision to go to Atlanta, take 4 people to leave, and while they're gone, zombies come in and kill a bunch of people. You know, that spirals into the choice Glenn getting captured. You know, that could have been a huge disaster, right? If it hadn't been for Granny showing up and saying, hey, come in here, Mr. Sheriff. Like, if she hadn't done that, that could have been a shootout. And Rick could have been killed, T-Dog could have been killed, Daryl, Glenn. It could have been a mess. And then they wouldn't have had the guns or the 4 bodies. And the walkie would have been lost. It all is lost from that one decision. But that being said, like I said earlier in the video, that's my thoughts on what the most impactful moral decision is of season 2 or of season 1. If you want to see season 2 or 3 or 4 down the road, let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like the video. I'm planning on doing more stuff like this and trying to have more moral discussions when it comes to especially the Walking Dead show, because we've talked a lot about the Telltale's The Walking Dead game. And while I do have some more stuff to talk about with the game, there are some other things that I want to discuss down the road, especially with the show. So keep an eye out for all of that. Join channel memberships, Patreon. You know, I try to shout those out every video because that really helps me to continue to keep things going and making more videos like this. But that's all I got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.